TGIF. Welcome to Fridays with Flora. Today is a special episode because it is our 100th episode. So yay you, because I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for subscribing, supporting, engaging, sharing tips on certain videos, engaging with the community, answering other people's questions, asking me questions. It's been really, really great. I've been doing this. I'm not going to date myself. Well, maybe I will a little bit. I've been doing the blog, and then all of a sudden the YouTube channel and everything kind of like grew from there since 2008. So it's been a really long journey, and I've learned a lot. And I realized in around 2017 when I was working at an ad agency and running a creative department and, having this really high stress, high power job that I wanted to take some time off and sort of soul search and figure out if I wanted to stay doing what I was doing or focusing on this. And in taking some time off and focusing on this, a colleague of mine said, why don't you do a Fridays with Flora series every Friday and sharing like what you're doing? And that's a nice way to be consistent and engage with your community. So thank you, Jenny. If you're out there watching, you're the one that came up with the name and suggested this, and here I am now at our 100th episode of Fridays with Flora. So I stayed with it, and it's been really, really fun. And so in celebration of my 100th episode today, I'm just going to answer questions. I did a shout out this week to my followers and my community, and asked them to ask me anything. So I got some interesting questions. So it's going to be kind of a mish-mosh of stuff here today as far as the questions that I got. The first few are a little personal, not too personal, but a little personal. Okay, so my first question that I got was, who or what inspires you? Which is a very simple question with a very long answer. So, as creative people, we're always looking and absorbing around us for inspiration, and as we should. And I would also say that even if you think you're not a creative person, you are. And so one of the things, if you think you're not a creative person, but you are, is to fill that creative bank. And so open your mind, look around, explore, fill your Instagram feed full of beautiful things, take time to journal, and your creative soul will start to get nourished. And trust me, you'll get inspired. So as far as my inspiration, because my blog and my channels are very diverse as far as like my interests, so is my inspiration. So when it comes to gardening per se, and definitely as I've evolved into being more of an advocate for biodiversity and bees, one of my favorite places for inspiration, there's two. There's an Instagram feed that I adore called Wildflower Yard. So look up at Wildflower Yard and follow her. Her garden is amazing, and she is proof to all you native purists out there and or cultivar gardening purists that you can have a garden that has natives and wildflowers as well as hybrids and cultivars, and they can live happily together, and you can have an amazing, beautiful garden that supports biodiversity. You can do it, and her Instagram shows you every single day. Now, she lives in California, so a lot different of a climate than I know for me in Chicago, where I have a very short growing season and some tough weather to deal with. So don't beat yourself up when you look at her Instagram and you get kind of depressed. Just be inspired and just know that you can have a really rich and full garden with both natives and with cultivars. So that's one of my big places for inspiration and striving for the best gardening. There's a place here in Chicago that I adore called City Grange, and it's a garden center and more. They really connect to the community. They have a lot of great classes. So even if you don't live in Chicago, follow their Instagram feed, City Grange, And they are really paving the way in how to kind of just change the business of garden centers. They've gone to compostable pots for plants. They've really lessened their carbon footprint. They do a lot of classes. So you can do a lot of their Zoom calls. I do a couple of their classes, so you can join me there. But they have a lot of inspiration for gardening. So those are my two spots for gardening. As far as food and cooking and baking, I mean, oh my gosh, there's just so much out there. It's even overwhelming. So, but my favorite spots to get inspiration for cooking and baking, New York Times food section, the recipes never fail me. They're always really, really good, and I'm always learning something. In the community there, people like making comments, making notes on recipes, always have really good feedback on them. Ottolenghi is an amazing, amazing chef, and he has transformed the world of vegetables. And he inspires my husband and I all the time. We just bought his flavor cookbook. It's mind-blowing. And Chef's Table on Netflix. I really recommend that series. Start from the first one and just binge watch. I mean, wow. Just next level chefdom. So as far as inspiration for my crafting and upcycling side of my being, if you will, I get a lot of inspiration from Pinterest, and just I have a ton of books, and I go to the library, and I do a lot of reading, and I don't know, I have a craft room, and I get inspiration all the time from just, I don't know, being an art person and keeping my creative banks filled all the time. And I will say that what inspired me early on is a woman named Katie Brown, and she is a lesser known version of Martha Stewart, if you will. She was coming up the ranks when Martha Stewart was getting really, really big. And I love Martha Stewart too, by the way. She's a really great inspiration. I just think some of her stuff is a little laborious. No offense, Martha. But sometimes we don't have like 3 days to work on a cake. So I try to keep it a little bit more real. And Katie Brown kept it a little bit more real. I mean, she was definitely in my age group, and I caught one of her shows when I was young on PBS. And I thought it was cool because it was called the Katie Brown Studio, and she would focus on apples, and she'd have some apple recipes, and then she'd have an apple craft for fall. And then she'd talk about apples or growing apples. So it was this gardening, crafting, food thing all mixed up into one. And she just was a little bit more down to earth and more in my age group. So kind of like the crafter for the Gen Xer, if you will. So, and I remember thinking, I like what she's doing. I could do that. Like, I could do that, and I guess I am doing that. So that stayed with me and inspired me, and here I am now doing what she did. So Katie Brown, thank you for being amazing. She's someone that you might want to follow as well. Anyway, so that's who and what is inspiring me on a day-to-day basis. I think it's amazing that technology has allowed us to have access to lots of inspiration. So fill your Instagram feed with positive, beautiful things that you love, and get out there and have creative dates with yourself. That is a key part of staying creative, is filling that creative bank. So get out there, go to the museum, visit a funky store that you would never go to, take a walk, get out in nature, get away from your space and fill that creative soul. And that's how you'll get inspired. So next question I got was, what have you wanted to bake or cook that you haven't had a chance to, but you've always wanted to? And this was an interesting question. I had to think about this for a little while. One of the things I've wanted to do, and you know, if any of you think this would be of interest, especially to the women out there, grilling. So I don't know why I have this deep-seated fear of like lighting my pilot lights. Maybe in a past life I died from some fire explosion. I don't know. But I've had to overcome my fear of fire. And grilling sort of freaks me out. I've done some grilling with my husband. I really want to dig in and learn grilling. So I think this summer I'm going to do a series of like the Urban Domestic Diva grills, and maybe doing a series to help me and some of you women specifically kind of just embrace the grill. You know, the guys out there have no problem grilling. My husband is a grill master. He'll be grilling out there in the snow. He's amazing. I want to learn from him, and I think he could teach all of us some things. So that's number one. And number two, I really want to try beignets. When I was in New Orleans, as you do when you go to New Orleans, you have a beignet. Oh my God, they're amazing. And I hear they're very hard to make. You have to kind of be in New Orleans to actually really enjoy a beignet, because it has to do with the humidity and the flour, and just in that area, they're able to make that beignet a New Orleans beignet. But I would love to see if it could be done in Chicago. So those are my two things I kind of want to tackle. But if any of you are interested in possibly doing a grill series, overcoming your fear of the grill kind of thing, let me know down below, because I'm kind of thinking about that. And my last personal question before we get into some more tactical questions is, do I have any downtime? Because it certainly looks like with everything that's out there and what I'm doing, I don't sleep, but I do. I really do sleep. When I resigned in 2017 from my crazy, crazy stressful job, I've decided to go freelance. And what freelancing does and working for yourself does is give you kind of ownership of your schedule. And with that, I've been able to fit in a lot of this other stuff, including this channel. I've written books. I've self-published now 4 books in a couple years. That's, pretty aggressive. Started the Instagram. I'm considering a podcast. Don't know what that would be. Everyone's telling me to do a podcast. I have no idea how that would be different from this YouTube channel. If some of you think I should do a podcast, let me know below, like what you would want to hear from me about, or what you would, I don't know, how I could serve you in that way, I guess. The downtime, what I've been able to do, and something that I never did before, was self-care. When you're in advertising, you pretty much live advertising. And my freelance projects can get very stressful, but again, I own the timeline for as much as I can. So, I've been able to, wake up early, get walks in. I've been able to start a meditation process. I've been able to start a morning routine and kind of own that. Morning routines are really, really important. Schedules are really important. But taking time for you is really important. And what I had to learn was, you make time for what's important to you. So when you say I don't have time, you're really saying I won't prioritize this. And that's the harsh truth of it. And so I was not prioritizing me for many, many years. And when I started taking my walks in the morning and just getting up early and owning that half hour before business started, before clients started calling, that was really healing for me, and it allowed a lot of other things to kind of come out of it. So that's my downtime, me time, morning routine, meditation. And yeah, I binge watch Netflix sometimes. Sometimes I don't. I keep the laptop in my office and I, just kind of unplug. So it's good. You just got to make time for it. You have to prioritize your downtime. Kind of make it like a job number and make it important, and you'll find the time for it. Okay, so one of the more tactical questions I got was about oats and baking oats. So I drew a little diagram here, so I'm going to walk you through this. So a friend of mine and fellow blogger and fellow Dom Discofier in Chicago, Liz, asked me about oats and what oat is good for baking and what
oat is not good for baking. And if you get into the world of oats, there's lots of different ways oats are processed. And so I made a chart here. I'm going to get up close in a bit, but starting with the most unprocessed oat to very, very processed. And so for baking, you kind of want to stay in the middle of this kind of processed oat, okay? So I'm going to zoom in here, but it's going to go from steel cut to Scottish, old-fashioned or rolled oats, quick rolled oats. Okay, these are the old-fashioned rolled oats and the quick rolled oats are similar, but one's a little bit more processed than the other. And then we get into instant, so way at the bottom here, where we're getting more and more processed. And then we get to oat flour, which is about as processed as you can get, which I'm not going to really talk about. But let's zoom in on my fancy little drawings and we'll talk about this. Okay, so steel cut. Steel cut is the least processed oat. And if you haven't had steel cut for a morning bowl of oatmeal, you're missing out. It's really, really delicious, but it's really, really chewy. And all it is the actual oat groat, okay, which is the groat from the plant, right? And all it is it's chopped up into little pieces. So it's got a really chewy, nutty texture. It takes a long time to cook because there's a lot of fiber. You have, the outside and the inside. You've got the whole thing. So there's a lot of fiber in there. It has to cook for a while, but that makes it not great for baking. So don't use steel cut oats for baking unless you really want a really gritty, grainy texture to what it is you're putting it in. Like if it's a cookie, if it's a bread. Stick to breakfast and or even lunch. You can do some savory dishes with steel cut oats. It's a really great grain. Scottish is like steel cut, and it's different in that it's processed, but not by getting chopped up, but being ground by a stone. So the oat groat gets ground up into almost like little pinheads, pinhead-sized oats. So you get a more creamy, less chewy oatmeal experience. And if you really want a lot of the grain in your baking, a Scottish oatmeal is going to do better in baking than a steel cut. So if you really want all that fiber and all that nutrients in a cookie or a bread, go with Scottish. When you cook it for breakfast, it's definitely more of a porridge style, so keep that in mind. But you're getting all that fiber. So as we move down, we've got rolled oats, also called old-fashioned oats. So you might see in the store it being called one or the other. And the reason why it's called rolled oats is because it does get rolled. So if you look at a rolled oat, it looks like a flake. It's a flat flake. So what happens is the groat gets steamed, and the steam, it's only lightly steamed, so it's partially cooked, and then it's rolled flat, and it's only lightly rolled. So it still keeps a lot of its chewy texture, but that's what makes it really great for baked goods, because it's partially cooked, it's going to be tender, but it's still going to hold its shape, because it's only rolled a little bit, and it's only steam cooked a little bit. So this is a really great oat to use in baking, especially if you want a more rustic approach to your cookies. You want to see that oatmeal texture in there or in your bread. So if you want to see it more in your finished product, you want just that little bit more chewy bite to things, a more rustic kind of look to your baking, rolled oats or old-fashioned oats is the way to go. Now from your rolled oats, we go to quick oats. So this is going to be even more processed. So we were slightly more processed, now we're even more processed. And why? Because we're adding one more step into preparing a quick rolled oat. So you might see at the store, it's either a quick oat or a quick rolled oat. The groat is steam cooked again, but it's cooked a little longer. It's rolled again, a little bit more, so it's going to be thinner. And then they roughly chop it. So what happens is you're going to get if you're going to have this in an oatmeal in the morning, it's going to be a little bit more flaky, a little bit creamier, but there's a finer texture to this oatmeal. So it makes it good for baking too, but it's going to be less rustic. It has a prettier finish to your baked goods. You're not going to see the oat grain like you would in an old-fashioned. So it's about the same experience and flavor, but this is going to have a prettier, smoother look to things. And it's just going to blend well with your other ingredients and your other like flours that you might mix in there. So the long story short is that really, if for baked goods, Liz, if you're out there, rolled oats old-fashioned or quick oats, quick rolled oats. These are where you need to stay. And it's up to you if you want a little bit more rustic look or a little bit more refined look. And just to finish our Oats 101, instant oats are very, very processed. So the oat groat gets steamed like a lot, rolled very thin. Then it's chopped, and then it's dehydrated. So all you need to do with an instant oat, and for those of you that are probably at work and you grab an instant oatmeal pack, you throw it in the microwave, all that needs to happen is just adding water. And you're adding water back into the oats. Doesn't need a lot of cooking. In fact, hot water is really usually all you need to do with this, and you have your oatmeal. But that's what makes it not good for baking. It's going to pretty much turn into mush. You're not really going to experience it or see it in any of your baked goods. So stay away from instant oats for baking. And then the most processed oat is going to be oat flour, which I won't get too much into. It's just a good, if you want to cut down on your wheat, or if you have a wheat allergy, oat flour is a nice alternative. You might want to mix oat flour into some of your baking to add the nutrients that oat can give. So it's just another option. But that's Oats 101. Great question, Liz. Okay, so my last question was a tough one, and I needed to call in a lifeline for this one. So since I've written my books all about native plants and bees and butterflies and supporting pollinators, and even 2 children's books. Christmas, you guys, Christmas. Teach our younglings all about native plants and nature and bees and butterflies on Amazon. Anyway, since I've written these books, I've been getting a lot of questions. And my gardening game is really strong. The bee side is not so much, but I have a really great colleague and friend of mine who I adore, who started a nonprofit in Colorado called The People's Bees. Please follow her. She's amazing. And the handle is at The People's Bees on Instagram. So if you want to just get a lot of inspiration from someone that can really simplify what goes on in the world of honeybee keeping, check her out. Anyway, the question was, what do bees do in the winter? And I know some of the nesting bees overwinter, but I wasn't sure how. So I wasn't sure how to answer this question. So Christine helped me out today and gave me some really interesting information around bees and how they winter. So let's talk about honeybees first. And the world of honeybees, just so cool. So when it gets to be 30 degrees, they huddle up inside their hive, all the worker bees, to keep the queen warm. They shiver. They do a lot of shivering as they keep the pupa, the baby bees, the queen bee, the honey. They keep everything warm, and they work together, shivering, to create warmth in their hive. When it gets to be about 40 degrees out, they will leave the hive and stretch their wings. They will care for their dead, their fallen comrades from inside the hive. They'll have a bio break out there. And then they'll go back inside when the weather drops again. So all of this takes a lot of energy throughout the winter. So they have to make sure the pollen and honey, they have really strong stores of that to keep all this going throughout winter. So keep that in mind as we try to help our bees, and make sure we have a lot of native plants in our gardens to make sure we're helping our bees out throughout the winter. So those are honeybees. So they pretty much hunker down all through winter. Now, beyond that, Christine tells me that like solitary bees and bumblebees do some different things. So bumblebees, the queen will have a small colony, and that colony will kind of like live and die within that life cycle of a season. But she hibernates. She keeps her eggs within her through the winter, and she hibernates. And then in the spring, she wakes up, she finds a new nesting site, and she has her babies there, and creates a small colony that she takes care of through that season. So the queens just kind of migrate and hop on over, and if she gives birth to any queens in that hive, they go off and they find their own nests. So it's for the bumblebee, we have to just make sure we have some nesting material and places where they can hibernate and overwinter for the queen bumblebees. And then same with our mason bees and our leaf cutters. Those are solitary bees, and they drop off their eggs. They have a life cycle. So in the winter, they drop off their eggs on mounds of pollen and honey in nesting sites in the ground. So they have nesting sites in dirt, in leaf piles. So it's really, really important, you guys, to hashtag leave the leaves. Make sure you have piles of leaves, piles of mulch, and you leave undisturbed areas in your garden that like dirt and just open areas where solitary bees can leave their babies and leave their young, and then they'll die, but the babies will in the spring wake up, and then they're sitting on a big food pile for them, and they have to kind of fend for themselves. So that's layman's terms on like what happens to bees over winter. And thank you Christine for helping me out with that question. Please go follow her. She's doing amazing work and helping our bees and our pollinators. So that's it on this 100th episode of Fridays with Flora. Thank you so much in supporting the channel and supporting the Fridays with Flora series. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your questions. And if you have any more, comment below. I will do my best to stay up on comments and questions. YouTube isn't always great at alerting me to when someone comments on something, so if I've missed anybody, I'm sorry. I'm trying to stay up on it on top of everything else I'm doing. Anyway, if you are interested in following what we're doing here, please subscribe below. It really helps us out with the almighty YouTube algorithm. It helps to support what we're doing here, and then I can continue to share with you, and together we can make the world lovelier. One pixel, one book, one blog post, one plant at a time. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Stay safe, stay well, everybody.